Hi, I'm Melissa.
And I'm Mike, and we are Destination Mystery.
Destination Mystery paints the story for paranormal content, abnormal adventures, and the fun behind the investigations.
We believe the paranormal is all around us. Each week, we'll take you to a new destination where we will try and solve the mystery. This is not the same old ghost story you've heard before. We will not only tell the spooky story, we'll go to the remote location to investigate for ourselves.
Fasten your seatbelts and put on your helmet as we take you on a new adventure that will leave you questioning what you've always thought about the paranormal.
You are listening to Mystery Media Group.
This is an introduction from Michael Freeman from his This is about his dad. Paul Freeman was an American Bigfoot hunter who claimed to have discovered Bigfoot tracks showing dermal ridges, which are fingerprints. The plaster casts Freeman subsequently made were convincing enough to be considered critical pieces of evidence by anthropologist Jeff Meldrum of Idaho State University and Grover Krantz of Washington State University, who put considerable time and resources into studying them. On June 10th, 1982, Freeman sighted a Bigfoot near Walla Walla, Washington, which he described as being nearly 8 feet tall and covered in reddish brown body hair. In 1994, Freeman captured a Bigfoot on videotape near the Blue Mountain regions of northeastern Oregon. Michael Freeman took his dad's research and turned it into a book. His hope is that someday his dad gets the recognition he so rightfully deserves. The database in this book has been collected and cataloged, not just by Paul Freeman, but all known evidence. What many don't know is that Paul had a network of researchers and years of research documented. It wasn't just one really cool video. His father's evidence was well documented, as you can see in this book. As many Bigfoot researchers would conclude, Paul Freeman was the best Sasquatch tracker of all time.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Michael. The first thing I wanted to ask was, why did you decide to write this book?
I decided to write the book first and foremost because I felt like it needed to be done. I felt like my father deserved it and that it was overdue. And, I felt like I was really the only person that was going to do it, maybe the only person that actually could do it. And I'd had a few people in my ear kind of mention it to me here and there over the last like 10 years. And it just kind of ate away at me. And honestly, the more I was around the Bigfoot community and the more I heard some negative things about my dad, the more it ate at me that I needed to write.
And the book is pretty amazing. It's called The Bigfoot Files, and it is loaded with pictures, evidence, field reports, the QR codes. Tell us about the QR codes and why you decided to put those in.
Well, actually, that was Doug Hychek's idea.
Hmm.
When the book came around and I talked to Doug Hychek and he agreed to help me do the book. Initially, I was going to take my father's audio recordings that he did in private, of his story. I was going to transcribe them as written chapters in the book. And Doug Hychek said, "Oh, no, Michael, I have the technology to do this. Let's put his voice in there and let's let everybody hear him talk." And I am so glad that he had that idea and we got to do that because it's my favorite part of the book.
Mine too. Really fun to be able to hear your dad's voice talking about it. Much more enjoyable, I think, than reading a transcript.
I would agree. It's much more enjoyable, and I did all the audio editing, for that. I didn't want to send the tapes to Hanger One Publishing.
Right.
So I had to sit and listen to my dad talk over and over and over about all these things. And aside from hearing his voice say, "Oh, there he goes," in, his footage, I hadn't heard him speak since he died in 2003. And so, it was emotional for me to do that. It was probably the hardest part was to do that. Second hardest part, I guess, probably was to write the ending of it. But and I wrote the ending. My sister Linda passed away last June, June 5th, in a motorcycle accident, and she was killed. And it was the next day, actually, well, the next night. It was about 2 a.m. and I just couldn't sleep, and I was laying there, and my boys were all asleep. My wife was at work, and she's a nurse, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep, and it just hit me, and I got up and I wrote the into the book, and short and sweet. It's not long, but that was emotional as well. It wasn't an easy process. It was hard for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sorry to hear that. That's not anything anybody wants to go through for sure.
No, it's not. And my sister was killed on my youngest boy's birthday,
Oh man.
so I have a double anniversary, I guess, for
Yeah. Some happy times and some sad times all together. Oh, that's
but
terrible. On page 19 of your book, you mentioned how generous your father was and that he would give anybody the shirt off his back if they needed it. So tell us just a little bit more about your father's character.
yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my dad was Superman to me.
And you named the chapter Superman, correct?
I named the chapter my very own Superman because that's how I viewed him. And I always just thought that he was all and bulletproof and he was invincible, and there was always these great stories about him. And growing up, he was just this person that you were in awe of, you know. But my dad was, he was hardworking and he was honest. And I don't think what most people realize is how actually nice my father was, because he was very large. He was 6'5", 260, 280 pounds. Later in life, he was very intimidating. To be around, and he had this big, deep voice, and he spoke his mind. He didn't mess around with that. He told you what
Those
he
are
thought.
my kind of people, honestly.
But he was very, very kind, and he
Yes,
was very
right.
loving, and he was very good to his friends and his family, and he was very generous. And even today, Thomas Steenberg, who is a detractor of my father's evidence, who doesn't believe it's real, first thing he will tell you about my dad is how nice he was. And if the world was full of people like my dad, it'd be a better place. And that says a lot right there for someone who isn't a fan of like his evidence. And we don't see eye to eye on that, but the utmost respect to Mr. Steenberg, for keeping that attitude and always saying that. I really do appreciate it. That. And I let him know that, as well. But my dad used to go to the elementary schools and give presentations on things. And he
Are
used
you
to help
serious?
kids. He used to help kids with presentations.
How fun.
And I believe there's a picture in my book of him and a student, Jenny Fisher, that he helped with the presentation. And my dad was well known for giving things away, casts and photos and even a hair sample and stuff like that here and there. And as a matter of fact, we don't have all the casts that were ever taken. Can't
Right.
find some of them. And it's because he gave them away to somebody. And so we don't know where they are. They're sitting in someone's garage someplace.
I
And
don't even know what they're sitting on.
just this past summer, Cliff at the North American Bigfoot Center was contacted by a woman who donated a cast there that my dad gave her. And it's a cast from 1987, and it's a cast of Wrinklefoot. And no one
I
has
was
ever
going
seen
to
it
ask you
before.
about Wrinklefoot.
Yeah, no one's ever seen the cast. I'd never seen it. Cliff had never seen it. Jeff Meldrum's never seen it. And so we just last year got a brand new cast that we didn't know existed.
And what's different about Wrinklefoot?
Well, Wrinklefoot's first and foremost of all my dad's evidence of all the cast, I have a soft spot for Wrinklefoot for some reason. He seems to be my favorite of the individual Sasquatch in that area. She was named such by Grover Krantz. He named her Wrinklefoot due to some strange scarring or wrinkling pattern that she has on the soles of her feet, which kind of differentiates her from everybody else. He believed that she was probably an older female, and he had found what he thought were dermal ridges and even some sweat pores in those casts. That is arguable, but we talked to, there's some people that don't believe that. But we do know that there's water striations at least, and I believe it was Chillicothe that found scarring on her feet. But Wrinklefoot has very distinct feet. He
Mhm.
has very wide place toes that seem to be very long. Her pinky toe is a little offset, and she has kind of a squared off big toe. She's very distinctive, so you know Wrinklefoot when you see her track. And part of what I do now in regards to Bigfoot research is trying to figure out who everybody was. When I say who, I mean the individual Sasquatch in the Blue
Right.
Mountains during my dad's time, what their relationship was, what their place was, and when they were around. And we get Wrinklefoot in 1984 at a place called Table Springs, and that's the first piece we get of her by my dad. And we get Wrinklefoot again in 1987, and we have Wrinklefoot again in 1988, and then she's gone. And we don't see her again until, I believe at least, and it's something I'm working on right now, 1992.
Oh,
And we don't have a cast, but we have some visual evidence, some video of some tracks and some pictures. I believe they are real. And it's something I'm trying to match up right now. But I would put her at 4 years after
wow.
the last time we thought we had seen her. And
Right.
we believe at least that, they travel in family. At
Mhm.
least the females do. That's what I believe.
The video evidence shows that.
And so I'm also trying to figure out like where Wrinklefoot's place is in
Right.
regards to Big Jill, and if they're like older and younger sister, or if they're mother and daughter, if they're completely
Oh,
non-related
yeah.
females that are just both mates. I would like to, someday maybe try and figure that out, which is probably never going to happen. But it is something that
But
occupies my
you
mind.
you get a team together of researchers and scientists and someone like Dr. Meldrum who knows footprint better than anybody, and maybe you can figure all that out. And I think it's awesome that you can name the individuals and be able to place them back to where you saw their first print. You know what individual belongs to that print. That amazes me.
We know that about my father's evidence. Yeah,
Right.
for the most part. For the most part. And a lot of the tracks are very distinctive anatomically, and
Mhm.
a few of them, like Wrinklefoot and Big Jill as well,
Yeah.
you can recognize them immediately. And Big Jill also is very individual because Big Jill has what is called Morton's foot.
Mhm.
And I believe you heard me talk about this in Pocatello, and I even
Uh-huh.
asked Dr. Meldrum a question from the audience. But Morton's foot is where your second toe and your third toe, both of them, are longer than the big toe.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Not to be confused with what I believe it's Roman's toe or whatever, where it's just
Uh-huh.
the second toe is longer, but it's the second and third toe is longer than the big toe. And Big Jill has this on her left foot only.
That's crazy.
And so when we find tracks of Big Jill and you see this, and it's always in the left foot, and of
Uh-huh.
course it doesn't show up in every step because it depends on
Right.
the position of the toes and the
Right.
substrate, and all those conditions that affect the track. But probably every instance of Big Jill tracks, and I think we have 3 times we've seen Big Jill that we know of for sure. All 3 times there are tracks that show this Morton's foot, and you can see it very plain, and it just so happens where she
Yeah.
in the tracks in the deduct video that are on the trail. And so we know her immediately when we see her. Yeah, that's who that, and then, you measure them when they're 13 and a half by, 5.5. And yeah, that's her. And we know Wrinklefoot,
Yep.
and then aside from that, it gets a little, wishy washy. We have at that time what we think is big male who's about 17 and a half inches. And we only have a couple instances of those tracks being. And so we don't really have a big enough base example, of that individual's track to really say, yeah, this is, the same individual. We see it repeated. But we do with Wrinklefoot and we do with Big Jill. And also with Big Jill, she left the tracks at Mill Creek Road in 1991, the 7 mile way.
Yeah.
She left tracks at Deduct. She's the one that's in my father's footage. And she is the one that left tracks at 5 Points in 1996 that my
Wow.
dad took Jeff Meldrum to. Aside from that, she was also known before my dad ever cast her in 1991 by Wes Summerlin, who had already seen these tracks for years and was familiar with this individual. He had named it Big Jim, not taking into account, possibly a female, but based
Right.
on size, and the database we have of the tracks. And for so many years, we've seen these tracks and they're not changing in size. At 13 and a half inches, we're kind of, we're as to the conclusion because we don't know for sure. We're
Right.
drawing the assumption that it's a female. Not that Wes was wrong. He wasn't. They just weren't.
Right.
Everything was him. You know what I mean? Even in
Right.
my dad's footage at DDUC, he says, "Oh, there he goes," not knowing. And now we know it's probably a female, but he didn't.
Right.
He was taken. But there are probably 7 or 8 people, at least, that have cast Big Jill's tracks.
Wow. Tell us about the video, about Big Jill video, and how you were able to enhance it and see more than what most people are seeing on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's the high checks. That's Doug Highcheck, Alex and Blaine Highcheck did a lot of technical work. They used forensic editing, and they really brought it to life. They were able to slow it down a lot, zoom it in, clear it up, and bring us, some images that we couldn't really see before. Most notably to me, at least, is the tree hide section, what we call the tree hide section of my dad's video, where after she walks from right to left in front of the Douglas fir, she seemingly disappears and then reappears. But now we know that, she's not disappearing. She's hiding behind the curving her body. There's a curved branch projecting from the tree, and she's curving her body in the exact line with that branch to hide herself. And, actually turns her head a second time in the video, that sequence, and something you couldn't see before. And of course, with the enhanced video, we've also got a better image of the infant, the juvenile, maybe whatever you want to call it, at the end there, that's being picked up, and you can see the articulating legs and the feet and what appears to be the baby climb onto her back is what it looks like, at least. And what I think now is an image of her picked up with one hand.
Yeah.
She seems to pick it up with her left arm, and her right hand actually swings backward. Another thing that we've recently discovered, and this was discovered by Cliff Bergman and an employee of his, was that after that sequence and she disappears, we can now see some moving black pixels in the trees that seem to off over the hill into the ravine. Appears to be just maybe the crown of her head.
Of her head.
And it's something that we did before, but do credit to Cliff and his team for finding that.
And I always wondered why she popped out, because she was hidden so well. Why did she show herself? But my thought was, okay, if she had a baby she was trying to protect, I bet she popped out to scare him, to let him know that she was there.
Yeah, I mean, and that is one of the things of debate. There are people that look at the footage and they say, well, why would she just show herself when she could have went the other direction?
Uh-huh.
Well, would you abandon your child?
No.
And that's the question. And if she has a child and that child is hidden back there, and she's hiding, and my dad's looking at the tracks and he's come to the trail, and he gets to a point where he's too, and she comes out and she snaps him that look with the head snap, and that's not a friendly look. That's you're too close.
It's like a warning. Yeah.
And then she walks off screen and she disappears, and he loses her, which is, when he turns the camera off, and he was trying to track her without being, helped by having the videotape. Maybe he should have never done that. That's a criticism. Okay, should have kept the camera on and filmed the ground, whatever. But he was trying to track her, but
nobody knows what they do in a situation like that.
And she disappears and she hides. And I believe fully trying to lead him away.
That's what I think too.
From that child. And then we don't see her again until she pops up out of nowhere to grab that baby and then heads back down. Now, what most people don't realize, and you wouldn't know this unless you've been to the site, when she disappears off camera to the left after the tree hide, about 15 yards that direction is a ravine that drops off. That's about 12 to 15 feet deep.
Sheesh.
It drops right off. And that's actually where the spring runs through, D-Dug's spring. And so she had to only go about 15 yards. And there's some debate on this too, because we're not sure what direction she went. And honestly, we're never going to know. I mean, that's the truth. And there's two possibilities. She could have taken a direct line to the baby, hiding in the trees or whatever. And my dad, never saw her until she pops back up. Or she could have dropped off into that ravine and moved down that and come right back up to where that baby is. Because after she grabs the baby, now with the moving black pixels that we can see that she does drop into the ravine.
Yeah.
And so we know that she goes there after the baby. We're just not quite sure how she gets back to the baby. And there's a little debate there because some people doesn't think that if she has enough time to go down the ravine. And it must have been a more direct line. I actually, a good friend of mine that lives down there, a gentleman by the name of Mike Casey,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a researcher as well. But he lives down there in Richland, which is really close to Walla Walla. And I introduced him to Dar Addington, and they became friends, and they've been going up there and some stuff like that. But he actually went up there and he strapped a GoPro to his head, and he walked the exact same route that she walked. He dropped into the ravine, down the ravine, and came back up where we think from the landmarks the baby was, and it only took him 4 minutes.
Oh.
Now I'm presuming that, a Sasquatch, she would have been able to do it much quicker.
Oh, yeah.
That. And as a side note, the person that was with him, that was filming with a video camera from a different location up top, actually where my dad would have been standing during the video, never heard him make a sound the entire time.
Really? Wow.
It's just the way, the trees and the ravine and nature swallows up noise or whatnot. But I thought that was interesting that he was able to do it that quickly without even being familiar with.
So it's entirely possible that she did the same thing.
So it is entirely possible that she did the same thing. And we do think when my dad turns the camera off to track her before he finds her again, at least a minute, we think the camera's off. And I think right now the estimate is anywhere between 1 to 5 minutes, probably. So a couple minutes. I think she has more than enough time to do that.
Sure.
But I will admit, and again, no one's ever going to know which direction she went. And maybe it's not even important, but I do think about these things.
Well, I would too. I mean, after I saw that video, I was like, trying to decipher it, but it was quite amazing. And then I remember just getting chills when I saw that baby climb on her back. I was like, oh, that's why she stepped out. That was my thought. I would have done it if I was a mom trying to protect my kid.
It's pretty amazing. And one of the nice things about the new enhanced footage is without it even being zoomed in or slowed down, you can see that now. You can see her picking that baby up just at normal speed, at normal distance in the new footage, and you can in the original master as well. It's just not as clear. And so there's always been some debate on.
You're not quite sure what she's
not. That is actually what was happening. And I even myself, and I've said this publicly a lot of times on every interview I do, I even myself for years, I had the stance of like, I don't think there's a baby in this footage. I don't think that's what's going on. But you know what? I came around really quickly when the evidence was presented to me and it was cleared up to show me what was going on.
Yeah.
And, I wish other people would do the same thing as well when they're presented with evidence, that they would come around and they would admit, okay, I was wrong. I am 99% convinced at this point. Absolutely, that's what it is. And I challenge people all the time.
And I've watched it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I challenge people all the time. If you watch it and you don't think it's a baby, fine.
Then what is it?
Tell me what it is.
Right.
And nobody can tell me what.
It's not a backpack.
So, I think the only answer that's been given to that, bringing Thomas Steenberg again, I believe something suggested that it could have been like a puppet or something like that.
Puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. But, a really cool thing about the book too, that I wanted to mention is that you've got evidence in there, like tons of track evidence, but you've got the handprints that you talk about in there. You've got the hair samples that you talk about. Is there anything else that you can think of that's in there that would be of importance for people to go in and look? I mean, we see a lot of footprints. We see a lot of video. None of it's very good. Yours is good. But, we don't see a lot of the handprint or the hair samples or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, the handprints are, nice. The handprints are super important, and we don't see enough handprints. And I believe it's in the book as well, that's handprint, that it was the knuckle print. My dad was 82. The third handprint that had been found. It was only the second time that handprint had been found alongside with accompanying footprints. On that as well. That knuckle print, the the 1986 handprint, which is the really big print that kind of has the webbing between the fingers, and the 1994 handprint from Biscuit Ridge my dad found, all show signs of the outward rotated thumb.
Right.
That doesn't close across the palm. That closes more like the other 5 digits. We also have examples of this from other parts of the country. Tom J in 2016 in Kentucky, a handprint that is eerily similar to the 1994 handprint my dad found at Biscuit Ridge.
So it's definitely not Shaq's handprint, because his thumb wouldn't do that.
it's definitely not Shaq's handprint. No, his thumb wouldn't do that.
Right.
And one of the noticeable things on the 94 print from Biscuit Ridge is you can see the knuckle at the base of the thumb.
Yeah.
You can see that. And that knuckle does not face sideways like ours does on our hand. It faces backwards like the other 4 knuckles do. And so we can really see that, and you can see the lack of like thickness and muscle structure down at the base of the thumb, as well on these. The 82 knuckle print has, a fingernail, that you can see in the cast. There's
fingernail is my favorite part.
But that also shows, that also shows the outward rotated thumb. But what we're getting with the handprints is we're getting, the same anatomical features over different decades in different locations.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't even know what else to say about that. I mean, that's really interesting.
It is. And we're finding that, the same thing with the prints, that there's so many different features of them that can't possibly be a human print, and it's never been identified as any other species. And you're getting all that same evidence collected with the handprints as well. And
yeah, correct. And the handprints, especially, go back to the outward rotated thumb, that is aligning with eyewitness accounts as well.
Yeah.
People that have seen them grasping tree branches or other objects, where they're giving accounts of all 5 digits closing in the same direction and not having an opposable thumb, we have.
Right.
But yeah, that's great. We just got to get the right people look at it and the right people who believe in it. And we've got a couple of them right now,
Right.
And you have Dr. Jeff Meldrum and other people, but we need more people.
We do.
Stuff. And, the footprints as well. And footprints are, I think, the best evidence personally.
Yeah.
To me, pictures and videos are nice. That's great. But it's not something that you can hold and you can look at and you can compare and you can see the facts on the ground and you can pass out of the ground. And you can look at the dermatoglyphics and you look at, the toe splay and the mid-tarsal break and the dorsiflexion of the toes and all these things that they were finding in prints before they even knew what they were.
Right.
And you have Meldrum who's doing papers on the mid-tarsal break in 1999.
Yeah.
We're finding, tracks and casts that have this, in the 70s and 80s.
Right. And
so,
all over the world.
And so these people that believe that all the tracks, all the evidence have been, misidentifications or they're fake hoaxers, or whatever.
Right.
Because these hoaxers are so smart that they were predicting the future. They were putting in anatomical features that weren't even discovered yet.
Right.
Because they knew what was going to be, down the line. And I throw that up when people talk about my dad. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he was so smart, that he knew anatomy so well. And that, this animal was bound to have like this feature due to its weight and its stride, that its foot would have to have this, that he was predicting the future, not even pointing it out to anyone at the time, letting someone else discover it, so many years later. Right.
Yeah. He was able to fake it exactly the same as some guy over in China that did the same thing years later. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So I think it's kind of silly, that it's not more, I guess, respected. And, not just my dad, but the research is, in a whole. But I'll go back to it again, that I wish as a whole Bigfoot community, the researchers, regardless of what you've heard or what rumor you've heard or who mentored you or who didn't like who or whatever, I wish they would just look at the evidence. Just look at the evidence and just throw out like who found the evidence or whatever. Right. Just look at the evidence and then judge for yourself. Like based on that, I think a lot of guys would open, and that's something that I was really trying to do with the book was, make it an evidence catalog and kind of Greg Roberts has recently called it a museum. He referred to my book as a Bigfoot museum, which is
it is. It really is
one of the best compliments I've gotten.
Yeah.
But, I really wanted to just present the evidence, not keep it from anyone. There's no reason to hide it. My dad's
well, how are we all going to get together as a community and actually discover what this is if we don't get together and share our evidence?
And I want people.
More people need to stop worrying about the stories and collecting a photo and actually go out and do casting and find hair samples and other stuff.
And, one of the things I did in the book that I thought was important was, number one, I did give all the evidence. I gave all the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I gave the location.
Yep.
I gave my dad's map. I gave the key to decipher every symbol on my dad's map that was in there. I told everybody what it was. I gave field notes with maps and locations and dates. And I think it's important because I want someone to go find it. I want Jonathan Summerlin or Mike Casey, one of these guys that are down in Walla Walla. I want them to go find one because if somebody finds one, it's going to validate everybody.
Absolutely.
And if somebody finds one based off of my dad's research and his tracking data on that map or, anything else like that, well, that's even better. So let's go do it. Like, I don't want to sit on it and keep it a secret. I'm not going to keep secret locations and all that stuff. I will tell you where it was found, when it was found. I'll take you there. Yeah. If that's what you want, I'll tell you the anatomical features of these tracks. I'll tell you that the Morton's foot on Big Bill is genetic and it's inherited.
That's great.
And we know from the video, or at least we think we know, that she has a child, unless she's an aunt or something like that.
Right.
But there is a distinct possibility that her children or her children's children could have the same toe feature. And one of these days in the blues, someone's going to find tracks that show that.
Yeah.
I hope they do, actually.
I hope they do too.
And we know that that's a descendant of this particular individual.
Absolutely. So tell people where they can find your book or your book museum.
It's my book / museum.
Yeah.
I appreciate the compliments. It has not all been positive.
Really?
So,
it's the Bigfoot community. You can't expect it.
It's the Bigfoot community.
You gotta let it roll.
And I knew it wouldn't all be positive, and I knew who was going to not be positive. I already knew that, and I, in that regard, I was not disappointed, right? Because the people that I knew wouldn't be positive were not positive, at least publicly.
Yeah.
But you can find my book any place really that sells books. Most, the easiest access at the moment is Amazon, and it's on sale there. Barnes & Noble online, they carry it. Hanger One Publishing carries it. I've seen it on eBay recently. So you could pick a copy up there. The North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon has it. I believe the Bigfoot Gift Shop and Museum in Forks, Washington carries it. Or you got desperate, you could contact me, I suppose. I mean,
right.
I could get you one.
It is quite easy to find. It's the Freeman Bigfoot Files, and it's got your dad's picture right on the front of it. So
it's got my dad's picture on the front. He's next to Bob Titmus and a gentleman by the name of Ted Butters, who
is he the guy in the glasses?
Yeah, bless his soul. In 1982, that gentleman, Ted Butters, I don't know where he's up to or what he's doing now, but he had no idea, I bet, who he was next to.
Right.
He was next to giants, literally,
exactly.
In the field when that picture was taken. Right. But we had to include him because the picture was so cool.
Sure, it is a cool picture. They're looking at the casts,
and it's we chose that for the cover because it's just we saw this picture. And they just look cool. They all look like James Dean or something.
They do.
I want to be there with those guys right now.
Like,
it just and it's kind of the reason, why we chose it. And, Bob Titmus and my father didn't see eye to eye on everything. That's well known. But, they
at least got together and did some research.
A lot of time, actually, I believe.
Yeah.
Titmus was, 5 times, I believe, he came to the Blue Mountains to look at evidence with my dad and do some expeditions.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being on with us tonight. It was a pleasure and an honor speaking with you, and I hope we get to see you in Pocatello. If you enjoy our show, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. For more information, visit www.destination-mystery.com. Find your own destination
And solve the mystery.